Hey guys, welcome back to Vince Bell Custom. So today we're going to do this repair on the sword for an Artorias statue. I don't know, I'm probably saying it wrong, I apologize. At least the name will be in the description. I'm sure you guys know what the statue is, or some if you don't, you can check it out. It's a really cool looking statue from what I saw in the pics, but what happened was the person that sent me the email said that their sword broke and they wanted it repaired. Now this is one of those weak points out of a sword that it can break on down the line, I guess because you have such a heavy piece here, and then it's holding to the statue with a little bit of a weak point. So what happened was it broke and it cracked right there at that weak point. Now this one right now I did a little bit of Dremel work, but you could kind of see, I could kind of twist it. I don't want to twist it too much, but I made a marker here and a marker there so I know where it's lined up correctly. Now when I talked to the client, I said, you know what, I'm a little bit worried about it because if it's twisted the wrong way and I repair it and you put it on the statue, it's not lining up correctly. So what they did is they had a second sword. Now I don't know if it's like an exclusive statue where it's got two different color swords. You can kind of see if we go down here. Or if maybe he has two statues, one's painted differently so you can see whatever, it's darker. But this hand is lined up correctly. So what I did is I sort of made sure everything was lined up correctly and I made my marks. Now, I also told him, I said, if you send me this whole statue, you got to pay for the shipping back and forth. We could risk damages, blah, blah, blah. So he said, you know what, I'll wrap up the swords really good and then I'll send you those instead. So it worked out for the best. So now at least I know this sword is lined up correctly. Now, because this is at a weak point and there's a rod in there, if you just add some magic sculpt and Aves around that little piece and then you say, okay, you're done, that'll probably crack again down the line because it's cracked throughout the center. You got to have these pieces like really secure. So what I'm going to do is I already dremeled out a notch here, and then what I did is I dremeled around the center and then I made another notch there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add magic sculpt, which is this here, you get a complete sculptor, really durable stuff. We won't do all the detailing yet, but on each notch I'm going to cut a piece of brass rod and put it in there, so this way it doesn't twist anymore. If it was a crack again, at least it would stay straight. And then I told the client, I said, sadly, because it's such a weak point here, we have to build up a little bit. So it's not going to look exactly like this piece here. It's not going to be as thin. It's going to have to be thickened up a little. But he's okay with that because, you just can't get it exactly the way it is. Like I said, some of these statues could go on forever and never break. And sometimes you just get them and they snap on you and there's nothing you can do about it. Just weak points on statues should, I guess design-wise, you have this heavy sword here, you have this very little weak point here, and then you have this hand here. So it's holding up, and I guess if you hit it or you put it in wrong, you're not paying attention, you could crack it. So we're going to try to get this repainted and repaired as best as possible, but I think this is the best option I came up with. At least it'll be locked in place there and locked in place there, and it'll be a little bit more secure. I don't know if I'll be able to do exactly like the line work there. I might have to thicken it up and kind of fudge it with paint too. We'll see how things go, but it's not really a hard repair, but it's not really a simple repair. It's one of these things you got to kind of do a little extra work to make sure it's secured for, down the line. But we'll get set up. We'll throw in some of the magic sculpt with the stuff there. We'll get that set up, and then hopefully by tomorrow or the next day I could come back and we could do some detailing work and maybe do some sand work and then touch it up with paint, and we'll be good to go. Okay, so it was the next day, the Magic Sculpt hardened up, and what I was able to do was use some extra Aves that I had, and I just kind of turned the item with it in there. Now this Aves has got to harden up a little bit, so I give it probably another, I don't know, half hour or so, maybe I could get in there. But what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to get some sandpaper and sand it down. I know it's not perfect, but I did have this dentist tool because I have a couple different ones, and this one was kind of wide enough at the edge, you know, like here and here, so you can kind of see. So basically what I was able to do is put that in there and kind of turn it and get myself a nice you know, piece in there. Now it's a little bit thicker than it was before originally, but at least now it's really secured and it's going to work out pretty good. So I'm going to let this harden up for a little bit, and then I'll probably go back again with my dentist tool later on, probably before I clean up for the night. And then hopefully by tomorrow we can get some sandpaper, sand it down, touch it up, and then it's ready to go. Alright, so it's the next day and I'm ready to do some sand work on this to get this ready for paint. Now, to sand it down, if you're going to use like this 3M sandpaper stuff, it's a little bit difficult if you cut off like a little bit of a strip and you go to sand it. It will work, but the only problem is if it's kind of bumpy, it won't get like a good curve on there. This stuff is great for a lot of sanding, but for something like this, it's a little bit difficult. Now, you could use regular sandpaper, you could cut off a strip, but it kind of cracks up and breaks, and it doesn't get it like that curve. So 3M has this stuff. You get this at Home Depot. This stuff is actually pretty cool. It's like a plastic sheet almost. It's you can use it like for wet sanding, and it's got a little bit of a give to it. I really like this stuff. It's pretty cool. They come in all different, you know, grades. So what I like to do is I like to cut strips off of this stuff. You know, you can cut it off in any sizes. I like using this for like areas that are hard to get. Like say you have to sand underneath the chin of a statue, but you can't get the sandpaper there. Or if you have to get between the legs of a statue because they're close together and you want to get it like clean in around something if you chopped it up. So it's good for like hard to reach places, like using, just think of like dental floss going between something. So what it is, I cut off this strip, and what you could do is you kind of stretch it a little bit, and you can kind of like sand in the area like so. Now it's also hard though, because like an item like this, how are you supposed to hold it and sand it? So what I'll do is I'll go off camera, and what I do is I kind of like I might like hold it off an edge or something, or I might just do it like here, something like this, and try to just go slow and sand it down and then flip it. Sometimes I'll put something you know, hold it between my knees, and I'll do some sandpaper like that. So that's pretty much where we're at now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to sand this down the best I can. If there's anything left, what I might do is just a little bit of putty work, you know, just some gray putty on there. But it's looking like I just need to get the bumps off there. And then we could just touch up the paint and we'll be ready to go. Okay, so I did my sand work, and that's as far as I'm willing to go with sanding, because if I keep sanding it in a little bit more like it should have been like originally sculpted, we'll get into that Magic Sculpt part, and I want to keep this secured, so we have to keep it a little bit thick around there. But I think we're pretty good with the repair as much as we can. I think there's a little spot I need to fill in with some putty, but I can't really tell too well, so we got to hit it with black paint next. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to mask off this hand, because this metal is different than this metal. So I don't want to mess this up and then try to touch this up and then this hand doesn't match the rest of the statue. So I'll just hit it with this with some silly putty, and then we can start doing this. Now Aves will bond to like any kind of paint you use. You can use like regular Model Air black paint on it and then do the dry brushing of the metal, but they also make surface primer in black, and actually this stuff is almost like this. It's not quite the same. This stuff goes on really smooth. This stuff goes on smooth too, but you can almost feel that this is kind of like a roughness kind of primer almost. But it goes through the airbrush no problem right out of the bottle, but you just have to clean your airbrush very well, because it will like make your needle stick and everything. But I have no problems coming right out of the bottle. You can thin it down if you want to, but so far with small projects like this, you don't really need to. Now I don't always prime everything that I repair, because most of the time you know, you got to match the colors anyway, so you really don't need to prime up small little areas. But since this is black with like metal dry brushing around it, this primer stuff will be great as a base anyway, so it'll bond up pretty well, and then we don't have to really worry about it. So I'm going to get this masked up, and then we'll hit this with some paints and try to get this all finished up. Okay, so you can see over there, there's a little tiny bit of a spot that I missed. It looked like a little pinhole, you know, like a little air bubble almost. So what I did is I used my gray putty, and I had these paintbrush, they're for sculpting. It's like a rubber tip paintbrushes. So just go in there and you kind of hit it, let that dry for a little bit. I'll sand it down a little bit, kind of, you know, just even it out, and then I'm going to go back on with some primer. Then we'll come back and we'll touch it up. Alright, so now it's time to touch this up. I have the stuff, Citadel Iron Breaker. It's kind of like close to this metal. It's not really like a crazy, I guess you could say like chrome paint. It's kind of more like dulled down. So what I did is I got this old paintbrush that's kind of messed up, and I'm just going to kind of like do some dry brush and just kind of get the paint off of it, as you kind of see. And then you just kind of let the paint go on it. So just kind of just like matching up what the factory did, because this is like all they really do. You know, it's just a black paint and they kind of just dry brush some metal on there. That's pretty much it, all it really is. And if I hit this area, you could kind of match it all up together. You don't really need a lot of paint. I mean, a little bit goes a long way because you got to kind of get it off the brush. Just kind of hit it in some areas. Now, if you do a little too much, that's fine, because you can go back with an airbrush and kind of take it down a bit. But I think this is going to work out just fine. That's pretty much all there is to it. I mean, that's, you know, I might just kind of hit it with my airbrush a little bit right there, and maybe, no, actually that's not bad. What we can do is just, you don't have to really go too crazy. You get like a drop of black paint too, and then what you could do is you could go over that area if it was too much. Kind of dull it down a little bit. So old paintbrushes work pretty good too, so, you know, don't throw them out if they get funky, or if you're using them to sculpt. Yeah, that works. Yeah, so there you go. I mean, that's pretty much the repair. I mean, there's not much to it other than just securing it and touching it up. I wish I was able to get it like completely perfect, but like I said, I think this was machined. It's either 3D printed or machined, where, you know, the sculptor puts this on was it like a lathe or a machine, and they kind of spin it, and they just sit there and they get it sculpted out with like a tool, and then they have a piece that's all done. So, but as far as just painting it all up, it looks pretty good. Now, if I think originally, if I'm not mistaken, you can grab, I know there's a paintbrush here. Where'd it go? There it is. So if you want to kind of match up the handle, what you do is a little bit thicker black in here, just to take out any metal. Yeah, there you go. So there's the repair. Hopefully it helped you guys out. You know, gives you guys some ideas if anything breaks on your end and you wanted to repair it. And this should be ready to go. I could probably just hit it with some Tester's dull coat real quick, but really you don't have to. I mean, this paint dries pretty well. And that's about it. So hopefully you guys liked the video, and thanks for watching.